Are we good to go on the video? Okay, great. Welcome to Design Dev OKC. We are almost a year in now. We've been meeting every month and come together. It's a great place to get connected to other creative professionals like yourself. If you see someone with a sheet of paper next to you, that is your cheat sheet tonight. There are several announcements there where you can look up how to get connected. There's a Slack group, and there's Instagram, and just a few other ways that you can meet other people. One of my favorite ways is Slack, just because it's easy to direct message people without having their info, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people use it that way because there's a lot of private messages that go through that I don't see. So I'm glad that it's being utilized, and just a great resource for people. Tonight, let's say it on video. Give us a round of applause for Tech Systems. They brought us snacks, and we're so appreciative. They've been our sponsor since January, and just always there for us if we need anything. If you are looking for a job, please go to them. They're very helpful. Tonight, I do have an announcement for Brian Winkler. He is not here tonight, but he is needing help with OKC Addies. There's an email address there on your sheet for him. If you're wanting to help out with some design production for the OKC Addies, he says he has a really good idea for that, and he wants some help. So contact him if you're interested. And let's see, I think that's all for my announcements. We have a pretty good night tonight. Will Phillips, Sleek Design Studio, is up first, and then JD Reeves has a book to show us, and then Danielle Davis does some lettering, and we're excited to see that. And I'll introduce Will first. I don't see him. Before that, sorry, join the conversation on Twitter. Avery Wilson is back in OKC, and he is tweeting from our account, and going to be live tweeting. Will is speaking. He said he couldn't live tweet tonight, so follow along as Avery tweets and kind of quote often. Actually, I do have a correction. JD Reeves is not. There's no underscore in his name, so you might X that out if you don't use the underscore for JD. Other than that, Will Phillips is talking to us about startup design. He is founder of Sleek Design Studio, and he's also involved in a lot of different startups. And he said he just started one this last week. I saw on his Twitter anyways. But he has a lot of good information to tell us, and so I'll pass it off to him. Do you want this? Okay. Thanks.
All right. Can I just sit on top of this? Yes. You want your laptop?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. Hey, how's everybody doing tonight? Good. All right. I'm excited to be here. Thank you guys so much for coming, and big thanks to Design Dev OKC for allowing me to speak to you guys tonight. I'm like a huge fan of theirs, and I love what they do for Oklahoma City. They've done so much to like bring a lot of creative minds and like designers together through all the things they do and they set up. So really excited. So I'm Will Phillips. I'm a designer, front-end developer. I work for startups and have experience in a variety of things. But tonight, just wanted to basically kind of share a little bit about my background, my story. just to kind of give you guys a taste for what it's like for someone like me, who's a designer like many of you, but working in the startup world, which can be very different from a lot of traditional employment environments. And my hope is just by sharing that story, maybe that'll inspire some of you guys to maybe take a leap and jump into something you've been thinking about. So just to give you a little bit about my background, I was born in New Orleans. All my family's still there. I grew up in Memphis, so, I've been on the Mississippi River most of my life. So love the food and music there in both those cities. But a little over a year ago, I met a wonderful lady, and we got married, and I ended up here in Oklahoma. So that's kind of how I've ended up here from those two cities. And gosh, it's been 8-10 years. I started fresh out, went to a community college in Memphis, started freelancing and developed this name, Sleek Design, which is kind of the moniker I went under as a freelancer. Just hustled, did projects for companies around Memphis, and, a few around the country. Did that for a little while. After a few years of that, I went to work at an agency in Memphis called Archer Malmo. They are one of the largest agencies in kind of the Southeast region. Got a lot of great experience there working on, big clients like FedEx, Norfolk Southern, some pharmaceutical companies, things like that. And they have recently expanded to Austin, I think. So they're still growing, they're doing well. But while I was there, started kind of getting into the startup scene in Memphis a little bit. Went to, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this, but a lot of cities in the US have what they call 48-hour launches or kind of startup weekends. And Memphis started having some of these, and it's basically kind of an all-out sprint, kind of a weekend sprint where a bunch of entrepreneurs or people come and pitch ideas, and people kind of get together and pick a few ideas that they think are really good, and by the end of the weekend, they try to pitch, that idea a little bit more developed or have something built. And it's kind of a contest. Sometimes there's prizes. So I started doing some of that in Memphis a little bit. And, one of the guys at Archer Malmo was really big on that scene, and he was kind of encouraging us to come out and support it. And while I was there, I met my first startup founder and, co-founder and partner, Richard Billings, and we started a company called Leafless. And it was basically a marketplace to support indie authors. We had a really different pricing model, and we were trying to buck the traditional publishing system, which is really old and really immovable. And we went through, I think, a total of 3 accelerators, which, if you're not familiar with that, startup accelerators, you may have heard of Techstars or 500 Startups. They usually accept anywhere from 5, 10, 20 startups, depends on the accelerator, give them a small bit of money, and it's basically, the way they describe it, it's a year's worth of work in 3 months. So it's intense, but it does teach you a lot about how to get a company off the ground, a lot about managing a company, how to get traction, how to get sales, et cetera. Makes you a lot of great connections. And so we came in with this idea. We raised, by the time it was all said and done, probably about $400,000 to build the product and try to get it out and talk to people. But after about 2 or 3 years, it kind of fizzled out. We could never really generate revenue like we wanted to. People loved the concept. We had a lot of people, jump on board with the brand, but we just could never generate that revenue. So that kind of fizzled out. And once that happened, I needed to find more income. So started working with some more guys on another company called Savvy PCI. Partnered with them. How many are familiar with what PCI compliance is? I know that's like, hey, okay, we got a couple guys here. Okay, cool. Is it like easy for you? Yeah, it's not. No, it's not Savvy. So these guys have a lot of background in this space and in technology, and they're creating kind of a set of tools to help professionals in this industry better manage PCI compliance and manage that data for their clients. And it basically has to do with, payments, payment security. So making sure that businesses are following security standards when, they're handling your credit card transactions and stuff. So they built a search engine for all of this data that they've sourced from a few different places. So it makes it what would normally take some professionals in this industry, days or a week to locate, they can find within like a few seconds going through our search engine. So they took a little bit different approach to how, it's a little bit more of a bootstrap model in that they didn't go the venture capital route or try to get a lot of big investors. But through their own time, our own time and personal funds, they've probably invested anywhere from, $500,000 plus into this so far. We've been working on it for about 2 years. And this is currently what I mostly spend my time on. Most of my day-to-day is on this. And I do the branding and product design and front-end development for these guys. So we got a remote team. I work here remotely. Most of us are still in Memphis, which is where I was from. And one of us is in Texas. So got a distributed team there, which is another, can be another challenge of working in a startup. Sometimes you can have a very virtual workflow. So with that said, oh yeah, and Kara mentioned it, but I am working on another company that I'm in the talks with some potential investors for. So if you're interested to hear what that is, I'll tell you that it will be a mobile app, but if you're interested, follow me on Twitter. I'll post updates. You can keep up with me there. So that said, with all that experience, and we've got that out of the way, as I've kind of gone through my career as a designer, I've kind of noticed that there's 4 paths that a lot of up-and-coming designers can take. And it can be hard when you're fresh out of school. What do I do? Where do I go? Where should I apply for jobs? But, a lot of them can go on their own, freelance, which that has a lot of advantages, a lot of freedom, flexibility. You can kind of pick projects you want, but there's a lot of downsides to that too. It can be feast or famine. Sometimes it's hard to drum up work. You can go work for a studio or an agency, which is nice. You get to work with a lot of other people on a creative team or a development team. Get to work on bigger projects than you might be able to work on just yourself freelancing. Or you can work in-house for a company, like a corporate company, which is also nice. Sometimes that can feel a little restrictive because you're working on the same thing all the time. But, the stability is a nice advantage of working in a situation like that. But, which I've done, a couple of these. But, as my experience shows, a 4th opportunity has manifested itself in recent years, which is working for startups. And we know, the startup ecosystem and economy itself is kind of a big thing. You hear that buzzword a lot in tech articles and stuff. It's a great opportunity because a lot of the growth in the economy right now is from startups. They're the ones that are creating jobs and doing things. I heard I don't remember his exact title, but he was like the dean of the economy or something at the White House. And he was speaking about the startup ecosystem. And he was talking about how if it were not for the startup economy, the U.S. economy would not be growing. It would still be suffering from the 2008 recession. So startups are doing a lot for the economy. And it's a big shift because of technology, as we know. The industrial age is not as relevant anymore. I mean, all of the companies that hold the power aren't the industrial companies like, the GMs and manufacturing companies and things like that. It's these tech companies like Google, Facebook, et cetera. And because of technology, you can do a lot more with a lot less people. So before I go further, there's like one little pet peeve I have, which is like what a startup is, because so many people have like different definitions of what a startup is. So there's a book called The Lean Startup, which if you're interested in startups at all is a great read. Eric Reeves, the author of that book, defines a startup as this. It's a human institution designed to deliver a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. So a lot of people like to throw this word around, I'm starting a business, it's a startup. That doesn't always apply. Although it is a broad term, a company that's making millions could still be considered a startup, even if it's been around for a few years. or, a couple guys in their garage building something new could also be considered a startup. So it does cover a broad range of things, but, a new business that is following a traditional business model, just because it's new to you or you're starting it up new, doesn't necessarily make it a startup. So wanted to make that clear distinction there. So if you're a designer like me and you're interested in getting into startups, I'm going to cover some of the pros and cons, if you will. Working in a startup is tough. It's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart, if you will. There are a lot of challenges, a lot of ups and downs. For example, if you're interested in working in a small company like a startup, you got to be a self-starter. Sometimes it's easier to get into a bigger company where, you're following a lot of policies or procedures or workflows or ways of doing things. But in a startup, a lot of times you're having to create that for yourself, and that can be difficult. And if that's not something you can handle well, then you're going to have a really hard time trying to get your work done. You may not last very long. Another thing when working in startups is you have to be a generalist. A lot of times you're working on a lot smaller teams because of strapped resources. So, for example, in an agency or in a company, you may be working with a team of people that all specialize on specific things. You may have someone that, does just mock-ups and UI design, and then someone who does just the branding, and someone who does the building it out, and someone who does the back end. And that's really nice and provides a lot of quality for clients and such. But in a startup, you have to cover a lot of areas like that. You may be the guy doing all of that and it's all on your shoulders. So it can be tough working in a startup. And so, you have to kind of let go of some things that maybe you might be a little bit of a perfectionist on, because you got to get it out, and the company's, relying on something to be released to succeed. So that's another challenge. It is risky. Obviously, startups are very risky. There's high turnover. Sometimes you might be, down to, really low end of your bank account, and you don't know if you're going to get paid next week or next month. And your co-founders are working on trying to find more money or more investors. So it can be really unstable. And that can be difficult to deal with sometimes when you don't know if you're going to have a job next year, if this thing is going to last the next 6 months. So that can be hard too. And it's stressful. Most entrepreneurs will tell you it's an emotional roller coaster. I mean, one day everything will be going great for you. And you're like, yes, we got these investors. We got like 5 new customers. Everything's great. And then the next day, like, man, they all left. The investors bailed. Like, it just all goes to pot. And that's the way it is with startups, and they can be like that from day to day. So yeah, there's some hard stuff with startups, but there's some pros too. Because, while at the same time you have to handle a lot more, it also gives you an opportunity to get a lot more experience than you would working in an environment where you specialize in one thing, or you're only able to touch a few things within a company. So it can be a huge opportunity to learn a lot very quickly. It also creates an opportunity for you to take bigger ownership of your work. You have a lot more input in a smaller team to really steer things the way you think is best, or the way you know is best as a designer or developer. And so there's a cool opportunity to do that in a startup environment where you may not ever get that chance in a bigger company. So that's another really cool thing that can be great about working in startups. And you can make a lot of money, which most people don't mind. I mentioned the risk factor earlier, and that's very true. But when you're working with a startup, especially if you're like a co-founder or a partner in the company, there's no ceiling on what you can earn in a startup. There was a guy in DC that talked about this a lot, and he was saying how, like, in your traditional employee structure, you work and you get your raises, and your financial gain grows 1.2x, 1.5x every year, and that's great, and that's offers a lot of stability. But with startups, you can get 5, 10, 20x return. I mean, there's no limit on what you could potentially make working in a startup, especially if it does well and there's a big exit. So That's a nice pro for working in startups if you're willing to take that risk. And again, because you have more ownership of your work in a startup and you can do a lot more, you can have a bigger impact with what you do. And especially if you find something that you're passionate about and you find a startup that's solving a problem that you think is a real need in the world, that gives you a really big opportunity to do something with your work to make a big impact. And that's a really cool place to be with your work. So that kind of gives you the pros and cons of, working in startups and, a little bit of my experience. So, just to wrap up, I hope that maybe by getting a little bit of a glimpse of what it's like to work in my world, it might encourage you, if you're interested in working in startups, to try to find opportunities like that. Starspace here is really great for that. I know I haven't gotten as connected to them, but I know there's a startup OKC that does things here. And jump in and, find ways to help out and find opportunities to start companies, or maybe you have your own idea and, you want to get it out there and see what can happen. So, all you got to do is just jump in. I know that can be kind of a fearful thing for a lot of people, to quit your job, take this risk. A lot of people think entrepreneurs are crazy because of the crazy risks they take sometimes with their lives to bet on an idea, but you won't know unless you jump in and try it. And you can set goals for yourself and point yourself in any direction, but you're never going to get anywhere unless you start moving. So, don't look at failure as failure. Failure is progress. Just learn from it, keep going. If you try this out and it doesn't work, that's okay. If you jump into a startup and it fails after a year, and you only made your little bit of money from working for them, you still probably got more out of that year than you would have working for another company, a normal company. Especially with all the things you took on, everything you did, all the things you got exposed to. And that, even if the startup doesn't succeed, that still gives you a lot professionally to work with after the fact. So failure's okay. You can learn from it, keep moving. And so, I hope that even if maybe startups are not your thing, or you think that, this guy's just out of his mind for doing this, who would ever do that? But, you don't have to apply this to startups. Again, my hope is just to inspire you guys a little bit. And whether it's a startup or not, or maybe a project you've been wanting to try, just all there is to do it is just to jump in and try it. So thank you guys so much for listening to me and hearing my story a little bit. I hope you enjoyed it. Was there any questions? We got time for Q&A? Okay, 10 minutes? All right, 10 minutes for questions. Anybody have any questions for me? Or yeah.
How do you suggest getting started at Oklahoma City if someone did want to go join a startup?
So your question is, how could someone get into this if they were interested in getting into startups? Getting connected to some of the people here at Starspace is a really great idea. A lot of the people that work here and run Starspace are connected to a lot of those things happening on that scene here. There's also a Startup OKC that I mentioned. I think they're on Meetup. Are they on Meetup, Jared? That Startup OKC? Where could they find them? They're on, yeah. So look for Startup OKC on Meetup. I think they regularly do events, and I think they have those 48-hour launches that I mentioned too. I think they do like 1 or 2 a year. Oh, there you go. Next one's in November, so maybe look them up. That'd be a great way, and that's a great way to meet other entrepreneurs in the city. And see ways you can connect with them, and maybe even, find opportunities to jump in on some stuff like that. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, yes.
What do you look for in a founder, and what are some qualities that you avoid?
So what do you look for in a founder, and what are some qualities to avoid? That's a loaded question. You want somebody that will stay committed, and that's something you have to gauge, and that can be a long process. Even investors, when you're trying to raise money for your company, that can take 6 months to a year. I mean, it's almost like you have to date the investors, and they research everything about you and your background and your mom and your cousins and everybody. And the same is true of founders. I mean, obviously, if you're asking somebody to that you can depend on to help you build this and make this a success. So, you need somebody that you're sure you can depend on, that won't just bail on you when it gets rough. And it's also good, find someone who complements your needs too. So if you're strong in one area and weak in another, find somebody who can fill that gap for you. So, if I'm a designer, I would try to find somebody who's really good at, back-end development, because that would help me and kind of complete the whole set we need to make sure that we can build this thing. So that's another good thing to keep in mind too. If you're looking for a founder to help you start an idea, find somebody you can depend on and find somebody that fits what you need to make it happen. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yes. So let me make sure I heard you right. If I'm coming into a new startup, how do I make sure they're kind of up to par on the quality? When you're leaving a startup? Well, it depends on how you leave. I mean, if the startup is like closing its doors, then there's not much to worry about. But if you're moving on, to a different opportunity, part of it can be some of the work you did there, setting up, guidelines and patterns and things to follow for the next person. And it depends on your position in the company too. If you're kind of an entry-level founder, not entry-level, but when the company started, kind of a top-level founder, if you leave, typically it's not an easy process because you're so tied to that company and so much of what you did is kind of integral to that company. When you leave, you got to make sure somebody else is there to pick up to fill that void. So it can be difficult, not to mention, other things that can be affected. But the nice way to do it would be to help find your replacement before you leave. And that would be finding somebody that meets your standards and that you would be fine kind of handing, the company off to. So does that kind of answer your question? Okay. Yeah. Yes, sir.
What would be the percentage that you should ask people to working on?
That varies a lot. It depends a lot on what stage you come into the company. So early stage, you guys, can determine how you want to split it, if it's 50-50, 40-60, whatever. And then oftentimes that will get switched up. If you take on investment from a venture capital firm, they're going to want their share of the company, which dilutes what you guys have. I think I read somewhere that on average, most founders who take on money by the time they make their exit probably have about a third of what their original shares were when they took on investment. So that gives you kind of an idea of how that usually kind of works out by the time it's all done. Yeah. And usually, again, that's something that, you and your founders would have to work out. But that's also something that investors will try to set in their terms as well when they're offering you money, if you get money like that. So, yeah. Any other questions about designing, working in startups, working remotely? Yes?
How does the, you said that you first worked with investors and then you went to the lean business model, like how did that affect your design process?
Not that much. I try to do, my work as best I can regardless of the situation. It can be stressful sometimes when, you're kind of strapped and, you don't know what the future of the company is. And it can be hard to stay committed if you don't know there's a long-term road there, which is a challenge of being in startups and working as an entrepreneur. But, despite that, you still want to do your best work as you would anywhere. But also the fact that contributes to the success of the company too. So, if I've done a lot of things from not just, specific work on like designing the product or the website or the branding or things like that that might be very publicly visible, but, designing pitch decks that, my partners use to, pitch our company to investors, or, documents or white papers and things like that. There's a lot of other things that go along in designing and working in a startup that you have to support, and kind of do your part to carry that load. So, yeah. Anyone else? Yes, sir. In terms of who owns your work while you're working at the startup? Yeah. A lot of that can be determined when you sign on. Always, do stuff with contracts and do it in writing, especially in startups. Even if it's with your family or your friends, do things the right way. And a lot of times those terms are kind of outlined there, whether it's, it's a non-disclosure thing or a non-compete thing. All that can kind of get worked out similar to how you would if you were working for an agency. Yeah, nothing too drastic or out of the ordinary there. Yeah. All right. Anybody else have any more questions? Yes, sir.
So, you mentioned something about start weekends. What's the process? A lot of people go to start weekends, projects.
Sure. So,
Get some light on what happens if you move forward, and then how that timeline is expected based on your experience.
sure.
You find money, why you find money is expected.
Yeah. So, a great let me start at the beginning. Your first question was, what happens at startup weekends? So, most startup weekends usually it's usually open to the public, and they invite entrepreneurs and other people with skill sets. Anybody can go, really. Whether you're a financial professional or a lawyer or a designer or a developer, like, all these skills are needed to start a business or to advise someone trying to start a business. So they encourage all these kind of people to come to this event. It typically, when they're 48 hours, typically start on like a Friday evening, and they kind of just kick things off, tell everybody how it all works, and then they will invite anyone who wants to, who has an idea, to usually do like 30-second, 1-minute pitches, short, quick pitches. So people get up in front of whoever's there, the crowd, the audience, pitch their ideas, and at the end of that, and they all vary on how they select them, but it usually gets narrowed down to just like a few ideas. And then everybody there kind of decides how they want to support these few ideas for the weekend, whether, they need some legal advice, or they need some IP help, intellectual property, or, I need a designer, I need a logo, I need the, and they decide, they all work together, they kind of team up, and then figure out, what they're going to finish within that 48 hours. Sometimes the organizers of the event will kind of determine, what the goal is by the end of the weekend. Sometimes it's left up to the teams. Sometimes there's prizes, cash prizes, or other prizes in the way of special connections or resources or promotional deals that, would help them continue on with this idea or give them a boost to starting that business. So, and they're designed in such a way to kind of stimulate that entrepreneurship in a community. So that's typically what happens at those events. And then, and like I said, it's a great way to get connected to other people in the community who are doing things. And also, it's a great draw to people who are looking for good ideas to invest in. Who are the entrepreneurs in this community? Who's doing what? Let me come check it out and see what's going on here. So that's also a great way to meet those kind of people. And when it comes to investors, people have written books on that. It's, you can cold call, cold email a lot of venture capital firms, try to pitch them your idea. The best is always to get a warm introduction. So if you know somebody who knows somebody who might maybe know some more people, that's the best way to get connected to venture capitalists and, try to get that money. So does that mostly answer your question? Okay. So what's the path from that point to being a running company? How did it work out for me? So we did a little 48-hour weekend thing like that. The first company I mentioned, which was Leafless, and we kept working on it, and I kept my main job and was moonlighting. And the guys that organized that event in Memphis really liked our idea and saw potential in it, so they kept working with us, excuse me, and encouraged us to apply for the accelerator program they had there in Memphis, which they only invited, at the time, 6 startups to a year, and they gave them $15,000 for the accelerator, to get through the accelerator and launch your business. After that accelerator program, after 3 months, culminated in a demo day, which they invited a bunch of community leaders, investors, and all of the startups in the accelerator gave a 10-minute pitch of their companies in front of all these people. And from there, we made some connections and were able to keep talking with some people and do some more work, and were able to secure some investment from there, which we probably got about 6 to 9 months later, so, which was that 300,000 to 400,000 we raised that I mentioned. So, yeah, is that okay? Cool. All right, how are we on time? We're good. Okay, all right, we're done. Thank you guys. Really appreciate you. Listen.
I'll pass it to JD pretty quick, but I also realized I didn't send around the clipboard, so I'm going to do that over here, and then I'll make its way this way, if you guys can pay attention to that. Also, let's see. I can't see. Yeah, JD is talking. He's going to show us his book, which I need to plug in. I'm really excited about, because it's kind of like a little Oklahoma love story. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, this is really good stuff. So I'm glad that he's here to show it to us. I'll let him take over for now. Yeah, give him a round of applause.
Thanks, guys. My name is JD Reeves. I am currently an art director at Ghost. But I didn't do this at Ghost. I did this as my MFA thesis project at University of Oklahoma, this book. So I went to school for 3 years. You would say, why would you go get your MFA in design? Because I felt like my work before then was really superficial. I felt like I was missing kind of a conceptual side of my work. And I really felt like I needed a little more formal training, honestly. And also, I wanted to have the option to teach in the future. So I went to OU, got my MFA. And the cool thing about grad school is that you can work on a project like this for a year and a half, and you can try a lot of things, and you can fail a lot of times, and then the clients aren't getting mad at you because no one's footing the bill for all those failures and experiments. So that's one thing that was really cool, is basically a year and a half working on this. Well, this was part of a larger project too, but the majority of the research and work ended up manifesting itself in this particular piece. It's a 132-page book. Another cool thing about grad school, I don't know if this is everywhere, but at OU, you kind of get to pick what you work on. I mean, you have to write a proposal and get approved, but so growing up, I grew up in northeastern Oklahoma, very rural area. My parents had land, nothing crazy. We had like 16 acres, but I spent a lot of time outside. And then obviously since then, I've lived in more like urban environments. Since I moved from there and went to school, we lived in Madrid, Spain for a year, right before I came back to OU. And so I was kind of just thinking through my life, and I wanted to make some work that was like authentic and like true to me and true to my upbringing, and something that I kind of knew about firsthand. And so I started thinking about sort of this idea of like rural and urban tension, and the way that manifests itself in the landscape, visually, economically, socially, all the above. And so, like I say, it was part of a larger project about land, the way we use land. But this particular idea I came up on early as I began researching. I came up on this quote which is nature serves as a source of energy, almost always invisible and impalpable. It is nature which provides us with health and vigor and peace of mind. It really rang true to me. I just thought about my childhood and how just being outside, I could like process things, and I just I feel like spending time outdoors is really important. And I feel like the way a lot of time we use land is more like economically driven, more about profit and numbers than about actually like preservation and you know what I mean. So I came across this quote and I started to think, okay, if nature is a source of energy for us, then like where's the wellspring of that? You know, where is this? Where is it most plentiful, most pure, and most readily available for our like consumption? If it's this source of energy, and the logic would follow that it would be like remote and secluded places, the places with the least influence from man and technology, dark, quiet, sometimes inconvenient places. Are kind of the places that he's talking about here, which this led me to the idea of the anti-destination. So, anti-destination, let's see, came up with this definition: remote and secluded place with the least influence from man and technology, in which nature is the most pure, most plentiful, and most readily available. And so I began thinking about that idea, and my first, it's really hard when you're doing stuff like this to begin like manifesting that research into actual like design. That's sort of the challenge, right? You like read all these books, and you're like, okay, I got a grasp on this research, but then like how do you go make something? And that's where I always kind of hit a wall. But with this concept, I thought, okay, it would be cool to have an app that sort of does the opposite of what our maps usually do. Like usually our maps are guiding us to like bars, restaurants, movie theaters, places with a lot of light, a lot of sound, a lot of people. What if they guided us to the middle of nowhere? And what would that do for us? What would that make us think about, and how would that affect us? And I thought that was an interesting conversation to start to think about. So I started actually designing screens for the app, and I presented it to my committee at school, and they're like, so you're wanting people to go where, like literally one of the apps is least connected in terms of cell service. So you're wanting people to go to these like least connected places using an app on their phone. It's not going to work. And so it's not that I set out to design a book. It's that it kind of came naturally from that. I was like, oh, if there's a little small 6x9 book that someone can kind of throw in their console of their car, or kind of carry in their bag or whatever, it can guide you to these places. Also, one thing, the name Atlas might be a little bit misleading. I got a little pushback on that from people because you might expect just a book full of maps, which it isn't. It has 7 maps in it, but it is a book about places. It's all about places. And so I felt comfortable defending it for that calling it an atlas, because ultimately it is about place. So obviously there's the cover, a little bit bigger than this for you to see. Here's the table of contents. The first chapter sort of talks about that idea of nature as a resource, why it's important, health benefits, mental benefits, spending time outside. Second chapter is about light pollution, which is like something crazy that I experienced growing up, is that I was actually in college, and I brought my college friends back to my parents' house, and they got out of the car and were all just like, oh my gosh, I've never seen the stars like this. And I was like, this is how I grew up. Every single day I could see the Milky Way, you know? So I was sort of thinking through that, and also just thinking through like bigger picture, how that affects people, having this like connection, like this like cosmic connection, and thinking about things bigger than you. Then noise pollution, air pollution, urban sprawl. Don't have time to like go into all those, but you know what those are probably. And then the last chapter just kind of specifically goes through the regions of Oklahoma and talks about interesting elements of the natural landscape within each of those respective regions. So here's an example of what one of the map pages look like. So using data gathered from different sources, I was able to kind of mark on the map where in Oklahoma, you can't experience the darkest night sky. And then on the opposite page, talking about why you would ever even want to do that. For some people, you kind of have to tell them, like, this actually is important. It's kind of cool. And so that's what that page is. And then at the bottom, there are like specific towns that are the darkest. And then, of course, throughout the course of my research, I came across people expressing these ideas better than I could. So I'm like, put some quotes in there because I can't say things that well. And so Wendell Berry was a big part of my research. And I really like this idea of like, to be able to like take care of the land. It's important that like we know it and we appreciate it. That's the whole purpose of the book. Is like ultimately you're wanting to have these conversations about like defending and advocating for the natural landscape. But if there's no appreciation for it, then no one cares. So this is talking about why it's important in the first place. This is something interesting I came across like towards the end of my research. The idea of this land ethic, which is like a theoretical framework for the way that we sort of relate to the land. So there's obviously like the way we relate to society here is like democracy, and the way we relate to others, there's a framework for that, like the 10 Commandments, the way we relate to like men and women around us. But for the land, there's not a lot. And so there's this idea of the land ethic establishes the way that both individuals and society at large relate to the land. And the land ethic it's pretty simple. It's just a thing is good when it serves to protect the like biotic community, and it is wrong when it tends otherwise. So it's pretty simple. You can run kind of everything through that filter. And then I thought it was important to go into specific places, specific towns, and talk about. So this is the darkest place in Oklahoma, and it talks about that there. This is actually one of my favorite pages of the book because it's like a visual representation of something that's typically not visual, it's sound. So I'm across the spread, kind of contrasting waveforms of audio recorded in like a very rural, secluded area with like downtown Oklahoma City. And then this part I thought was cool. I don't know how many people are actually going to do it, but I like the idea of like, you should mark in this, you should go to these places. So I created this logbook, which allows you to like record coordinates, make notes about these places, mark it on a map, and sort of keep record of these places that you're actually visiting. And so just to like conclude, the point of the book was just to talk about these anti-destinations and like acquaint readers with areas that would typically be like blank spots on the map, in hopes that they would like see value in them and be motivated to preserve and protect them. So that's the book. Does anyone have any questions? I have no idea how long that was. Yeah, so in 2010, I graduated from Oklahoma Baptist with a degree in design. And I always say now that like OBU's design program is pretty good, but when I went through it, we were the first class to go through it, and we were like guinea pigs, and I like didn't really learn anything. Sort of my senior year, I went to a show at OSU, and I was like, this is what a senior in college designer should be doing. I was like, oh my God, I thought this would be me in like 10 years. And so I really had to go back and like teach myself a lot of things to even be sort of like viable as a designer who gets paid to design. And that's another big reason why I felt like going back to school was important. I was like, I feel like I probably missed some things, and I'm going to be in some meeting someday, and they're like, why didn't you do this? And I'm like, no one ever taught me that. So I was like really insecure all the time, really like super like imposter syndrome all the time, like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I just wanted to cover my bases in that. And so I applied to different schools, and I got funded at OU, and I was like, well, if I'm going to go to school for free and didn't really know what I was going to do anyway, we were living abroad, that's why I went back to school. And that's my education before. Yeah.
If you said you had one place that you just had to tell everybody, you have to go to this one place in Oklahoma, what would it be?
I'm supposed to repeat the questions, I just remembered. She asked if I had to tell everyone one place in Oklahoma, what would it be? It's actually, like southeastern Oklahoma is on almost like all of these maps. Very quiet, a lot of trees, a lot of stars. But like growing up where I grew up in northeastern Oklahoma, I like think it's really beautiful. I think a lot of people have this idea of Oklahoma as just like plains, red dirt, like wide open, which it is. But a lot of people, when they get in northeastern Oklahoma, are like, wow, this landscape is totally different. And so just to me, that being where I'm from, I think it's a really like cool place to go and see something a little bit different. Yeah.
So with things like land, especially like outside of the rural land and nature, they're kind of like almost like intrusive archetypes of design, like expectations. And I think in a refreshing way, you kind of like address that. We talk about why you chose to do that, why you did wait a little bit more than people might expect from a book about nature.
Yeah, I mean, I originally explored it, and I was like, obviously going the direction of like the way things I think were tending to go. But this was also part of a larger project, and I sort of established kind of an overall visual language for that early on. And I actually struggled with that. Like this was the 13th redesign of this book, which I was in school, so I had time to do. But I wasn't really happy with it until I landed on this, and I just felt like. I don't know, I felt like the high contrast and just adding in that little bit of red, which sort of hints at kind of the Oklahoma landscape, and even sort of makes me think of like barns where I was growing up, sort of that like really like rusty color of red. I felt like, yeah, when like talking about nature, it could have gone a totally different way, but I just wanted it to be different. I wanted it to be about the information and not so much about sort of those like visual tropes that have to do with that. Yeah.
You started off saying that, some inspiration behind your book was, you growing up in a northeast Oklahoma.
Uh-huh.
So as you were designing this book, was there a moment that you kept going back to and say, inspiration was how that work out?
Yeah, sort of the story that I told earlier about seeing. He asked if there was a moment that I kept going back to as I was designing this that I was thinking about from maybe previously in my life that I thought about as I was designing this. The story that I told about seeing the stars and just the contrast of like people who had never seen those. And a lot of the research I was doing is just like the night sky's disappearing. In 10 years, there's supposedly going to be 3 places in America that you can see the Milky Way. And I was just like, well, that's obviously not the most pressing environmental issue of our time, but like someone should maybe talk about that because, I don't know, people, I think all of us, me included, have our heads down a lot, very like self-centered. And so, I don't know, looking up, having some kind of connection with like the rest of humanity is a cool thing to talk about, I think. And just thinking about me as a kid coming home from school at the end of the day and just like sitting outside and like being very mindful and like practicing mindfulness as a kid and not even realizing it, but having nothing else to do because I was an only child sitting outside on our land. But then like seeing the benefits of that, stuff that I was thinking about as I was designing this. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he asked, since it was a school project, what was the process of getting it published and selling it, and was I mindful of like, what did you say? Yeah, recycled paper. Yeah, so it was the first draft of it was 100% recycled. This is very important to me, obviously, because of the subject matter. And then when they like pulled it through the perfect binding, the recycled paper like couldn't hold up, and they called me 2 days before my thesis and were like, we can't do it. And I was like, what do you mean you can't do it? They're like, it's smearing really bad, we can't do it. And I was like, well, can you just change the paper? And they're like, oh yeah, we can do that, we'll have it to you. I was like, okay, well, don't say you can't do it if you can do it. Freaking me out, I gotta present this in 2 days. So I did have to make some concessions on that. So the cover is not 100% recycled, the rest of it is. But to answer the first part of your question, I used a printer called Smart Press in Michigan because I was in school and it was super cheap. And I went on under consideration for print only and was like looking at like what has been featured on there. And I saw Smart Press and I was like, well, they can be on here and they're cheap. So it must be decent quality. I'll use them. So, but they were like super helpful with stuff like that. They're like just this batch that I just got, the spine was like crinkled up on them, and they just sent me new ones today, just full order, replace it. So, yeah, you can get it here tonight. I have some. They're $15, cash or Venmo. He asked where he could get the book. Keep forgetting to say the question. You can also order it at this website, the atlasofantidestinations.com, and I'll ship it to you. Yeah. He asked what the process to finish my master's was. So I had to do a thesis defense, which is basically a 20-minute talk, kind of similar to this, but I was presenting the whole project. So this was like one of like 9 or 10 components of the project. And then you're presenting it before the entire art faculty at OU. So when you have like a guy from ceramics and a guy from like technology, they just throw these questions at you and you're like terrified about what's going to happen. But that's what happened. I had to present it there, and then I had to write a thesis paper with that. I had an exhibition, sort of all of those things kind of combined. Yeah.
How would you say that doing this book has helped you in your work?
He asked how this book has helped me in my real work. So obviously, when you're working with a client, you don't have a year and a half on a lot of projects. But one way it has really helped me, and just grad school as a whole has really helped me, just about putting more work on like the front end of something and really like understanding your subject matter before you're like ever jumping on the computer. I'm like always embarrassed to admit, but I always say like every logo I used to do before going back to school, I jumped straight on Illustrator. And usually one of the first like 4 or 5 I did, I was like, not bad, send it to the client. And so going back to school, they were like, your work is really superficial. And I was like, ouch, but help me, because that's why I'm here. So they're like, sketch 300 logos before you ever even jump on the computer. And I was like, oh, okay. And so, yeah, grad school as a whole, and then this project specifically, just really like putting more emphasis on the concept side and really like having all those loose ends tied up before you're ever even making anything. And then it all comes together, and it comes together in a much stronger way than it would if you were just trying to make something right off the bat. Any other cues I can A? Yeah.
So how do you feel like an advanced degree has benefited you? Is it, in your career?
Mm-hmm.
Is it tangible, intangible, constant?
Yeah, he asked how having an advanced degree has benefited me in my career, and really just what I was saying just then. Just the way that I work, the way that I think, completely different from going to school for 3 years. Really, even just having a little bit more advanced level, like art history, really understanding like my place and just like the lineage of like making things. Really wanting to make like authentic work that's true to me, and just more thought and more understanding behind the work, I feel like has taken me to a level I wouldn't have gotten to on my own apart from school. Getting every 2 weeks presenting this and getting it completely torn apart and having to not take that personally, just take it as like they want to help me make it better. I think I grew like thicker skin through that process. Honestly, a lot of the things that like our students at OU get in the undergrad that I didn't before, I had to go back and get.
Have you gotten anyone lost?
Have got anyone lost? Not that I know of. I'm sure it will happen though. As I think it's like talked about in here is like kind of the point of just like getting lost, finding your way out. You'll figure it out. I say in here, like, you might have to stop and ask for directions, which is what people used to do way back in the day. Anything else? Well, I just want to say thanks so much for letting me come here and talk. I really appreciate it. It was really fun. And if anyone is interested in a book or wants to talk anymore, back there. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna get hers pulled up too. This is Danielle Davis. Actually, I saw the clipboard over here. You make sure it keeps going. Or did this side get it?
It came back to me.
Oh, okay. Have you guys seen the clipboard? You have? Some people say yes. Okay, this row is up. Yep. There we go. Okay. Thank you, guys. Danielle Davis, I think I've been following her for a long time now. Yeah, her lettering is amazing.
I'm like, someone knows me from the internet?
Yep. Yeah, so welcome her to Design Up. Oh, I'm sorry.
I know, I overslided.
Uh-huh. Do you want to hold this?
Yeah, I want to hold it. This is my only time to be a rock star, y'all. And I got to get my hair because I'm on camera. Because the thing is, I was going to do a lot more like what we call spilling the tea, but because they said they were going to record it, so I got to keep it clean now. So you won't get all the, the juicy stuff from clients and things like that. Even though I really want to tell y'all, but I mean, I don't want anyone to sue me. So what do? I do lettering. That's my bread and butter now. I do some illustration and some design, but it's mostly lettering. And yeah, lettering, yay. Does anyone do like working with typography or anything? Yeah, got some hands. Anyone do any lettering? Interest in lettering? No? After this, oh yeah, I had a hand. Ooh, I got some hands. I love it because I love it. And so this is probably the only time someone wants me to talk about it. So you're all going to get like the whole Danielle show here for lettering. Because if anyone wants to join the cult, please do it. I mean, it's so much fun. Okay, so I do lettering. Let's see. And I'm a full-time freelancer. I've been doing full-time freelance for about 4 years now. Before that, I worked in 8 to 5 marketing and for design for a hospital. Does anyone ever work with doctors? Lucky. Doctors are their own crowd. And working with design and doctors, I mean, that's where this thick skin develops. Because those doctors know what they don't like when you show them something, and you're like, oh, okay. So freelance dance for 4 years. If you notice my accent, I got a little Okie Baltimore in there. I got a little East Coast. I know, I didn't realize I had an accent until I started teaching. And they're just like, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from here. I'm like, no. And I was like, yeah, okay. I got a little bit of accent. So I went up there for grad school. I came back down for personal reasons. And the thing is, I live in Lawton, which is, anyone been to Lawton? Yay! I'm liking these hands. Lawton. So hour and a half south from here, so it's a bit of a drive to come up here, and there's no design scene down there, even though I teach, and I'm trying to, get those young minds to love it, but they're young, and they don't like stuff. You know what I mean? So coming up here, I'm so excited there's a crowd for me to talk to. So yeah, so full-time freelance, I mean, just like you said, it is very scary. I had a big client leave me in February, and I was sweating, because then you have to do the hustle. Like, how do I get some more clients to fill that space? Because I need to make money, because I need to live. So yeah, freelance. Oh, the question that comes up, how do you know when you want to jump into freelance? The minute I knew is the minute I had to take more and more calls during the day during my 8 to 5, and they were getting kind of mad at me. You know what I mean? I was like, oh. So I had to take this one call, and they had to call me. I like to email me, but no, they had to call me. So I took the call. It was during my 8 to 5. I had nowhere to go for the phone call except for the bathroom or outside. And I was like, bathroom's weird. I'll go outside. So I went outside, and I had to sit on the curb, and I had to have the phone in my shoulder, right? Then I had to have this hand in the ear so I could hear on the phone, and I had to write like this, right? And I'm like, please, like, no traffic noise. I don't want them to know I'm outside. But then finally the guy's talking, and he just goes, are you on a cliff? I go, no. He goes, what is all that noise? I go, I'm outside. Like, I'm really sorry, I had to go outside. So that's when I knew the more that if it was gonna go in that direction, I didn't want anyone to leave me as a client. So I go, okay, maybe it's time to jump. Right, and I did, so it was good. So I get to do a slide for my client logos. Looks official, huh? So I don't do it on my website, but I'm like, oh, I gotta put the logos up there. So some of my big clients I do some title designs for Nickelodeon, a bunch of greeting cards for American Greetings. That's my main source of income right now. And then also SDG, which is Seth Design Group up in Maryland. And she specializes in restaurant design, restaurant branding. So I get to do a lot of logos and murals and things like that, so that's really fun. You'll see some more examples during my slideshow. Okay, so I know when y'all work on branding, it's probably a little bit more lengthy in project length. For lettering, I'm wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. It's gotta be in and out. Usually I have a week from here's the assignment, where's our first set of roughs, a week, but really it's 2 to 3 days because I have to schedule other projects during the same week. You know what I mean? So it's like the faster I work, the more money I make, the old turn and burn. You know what I mean? So volume, I'm high volume. Letter, done. Give me my money. I try to sound nicer on camera. I'm not money hungry. I promise. I love design, but I also love money. Okay, so what does lettering mean? I mean, when you work with typography, that's probably, you're working with fonts. If you have a little bit where you have to customize it, that's kind of where you maybe kind of move into the realm of a little bit of lettering, but lettering is actually drawing the letters from scratch. You know what I mean? So usually I get a mood board or I provide a mood board. So what style is most appropriate? What are we doing? If it's something for Halloween, maybe it's something spooky, right? Something for Valentine's Day, and maybe it's a little more delicate and about love, right? So then deciding what's appropriate. There's a lot of different styles that I do, but I kind of broke it down into the 4 kind of core generalized styles to kind of give you an idea of the variety. So I do a wide variety of lettering styles. Sure, I didn't hit that. Okay, first is what I call fancy scripts, right? For especially a client like American Greetings, you got stuff for Christmas, right? You got stuff for Valentine's Day. You got things about marriage and love and anniversaries. So what does that mean? It means something a little bit more delicate, a little more pretty. Right? It has to be a little bit more feminine. That's the whole. So then, this is only these are specific things I've picked out of the actual client work I do. But, I mean, if you see the word love, it's for a longer piece of lettering. It's just one word I picked out to fit on my slide. You know what I mean? So it's not just one word. It's the actual whole composition. They give me a message, and I counted my longest message. It was about 20 words on a little 4x5 card. So imagine trying to get all those words in there with nothing getting lost, it really hitting the theme and the style. So that one was really hard. But so this is, swashes. Swashes are big now for things that are pretty and delicate. I love doing that. Not everyone likes it. I always try to pitch it to the client. I'm like, we should put some line work in. They're like, no. So I'm like, okay, we'll just make it clean. Okay. Next is casual scripts. This is for, something a little bit more fun. It's got some more personality. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be so rigid. And so you can see the different styles, something a little chunky, fatter, a little retro, like the Battered. Believe, have you guys worked in kind of monoline fonts now? Monoline is big. Those fonts, like that selfie font. Everyone ever used that selfie font? No? Okay. In the lettering world, it's big, right? So the whole monoline trend is getting, very popular. So I've been doing more and more monoline stuff. But you can see, even though it's all casual scripts, they're all different, right? These are all for different projects. So it's never just about, give me something casual. It's, well, what kind of casual do you want? You know what I mean? Then, I should have said playful, but I said casual or quirky. Sometimes something needs to look more retro, like circusy, or something that has a little bit more bounce to it, something can be fatter or taller. So that's kind of, if it's not in those main, little bit more structured categories, then it's something that can be a little more fun. So here's an example. On the right, if I post stuff on the Instagram, it's because I like to experiment with styles that I don't necessarily get to do in my client work. So then that's why when I ever do stuff on Instagram, it's way different than the clean stuff you see me showing. So on the left, I love detective movies. When I work from home, what do I listen to? I listen to podcasts and I listen to movies, right? Favorite movie is My Cousin Vinny. Anyone like that movie? Oh, I love that movie. I love him in that. Anyway, I laugh like crazy at that movie. But anyway, so I love detective movies, even though My Cousin Vinny isn't a detective movie. So I decided, I had some time between projects. Let me do something kind of fun, something retro. I haven't had a chance to do that in my client work. So then I produced that. And then on the left is, it's a spot for The Guardian I did a long time ago. But you can see how it's supposed to be really playful, bold, put some color in there, put some texture, right? And that's actually my fastest turnaround for any project. It was 2 days, in and out. He gave me the email, Daniel, you have 1 day. I'm like, I'll do it. I like money. I'll do it. Okay, put it in, 1 day for changes, it goes to print. So I'm like, one of those things where you're pounding coffee, and you're like, oh, I gotta stay awake, I gotta design. And so that was fastest turnaround. So here's what, I kind of combine these, kind of illustrative or brush style. If you want the words itself to look like what it's supposed to represent, that's kind of what goes into that, right? Fondue, it was for a campaign for a melting pot, like the melting chocolate and cheeses. It's melting, right? Simple. Then you have eat was for, I'll show more examples of that, but eat is for a sandwich place. So it needs more kind of a diner neon feel, right? Mom, it's like a signature, burns on fire. So here's something I'm really proud of. This is like the first major project that I ever got on TV, right? It's for the Haunted Hathaways. Anyone have kids? Some of y'all as kids watch that show? No? It's okay. I actually have a student. I teach some in Lawton. I have a student, and she likes to tell me how much she hates the show. And I'm like, what? What would you tell me that? She goes, I don't hate the title. I just hate the show. I'm like, okay. But so this one, the style, the mood board they give me was, the show's about, it's like the Brady Bunch meets Casper, right? Like a mom and her 2 daughters moves down to New Orleans and meets a dad and his 2 sons with their ghosts. Yeah, I don't write it. You know what I mean? And so they're the Brady Bunch. They live together, and they live in a spooky house, So then what's the style? Something that's got to represent maybe New Orleans architecture, Gothic, something that shows connectivity, like literally, right? So then that's where I really got to experiment with something that's kind of scary. Even though this is my favorite version, the final version actually has lowercase on the bottom. Because one of the things they have to make sure it's got to be a little bit more friendly. Sometimes it's got to be legible. They were kind of concerned about the all caps. So, but this is still my favorite, so this is the one I show. So for this project, they actually wanted 8 logo rounds, 8 options. Usually I do 2 to 3, because then it kind of gets that project still moving. But you don't say no to Nickelodeon when they say, I want 8. And you're like, okay, I'll give you 8. But just imagine, I only showed 4. But just imagine, I had 4 more where I'm like, how else can I show scary? You know what I mean? How else can I show spooky? But these are my favorite. Top is kind of like adventure. Bottom left is my Scooby-Doo homage. And then the right is something a little bit more wispy to speak about being ghosts and, all that stuff. So then this was what I showed before, the deli, the diner lettering. This is for a sandwich place in California called Bronx Sandwich Co. I work with a lady, Seth Design Group. She does the restaurant branding. But she allowed me to do some lettering that kind of spoke back to that neon retro style, because it's supposed to be kind of like diner sandwich place. And so that's what I kind of did, this really fun treatment. I also helped lay out the tray liners. You can kind of see, you see a little bit right there. I was super proud. I'm like, you want to use it? Yeah, let's put it on there. So then I tried to repeat it as much as possible. I was like, we should put it here. I'll put it here. And then she's like, Danielle, you have too much neon. I go, oh, okay. But I also did some other, iconography in there, but it was just kind of fun to show the different style. Because when you go from Haunted Hathaways to Neon Diner, it really shows the wide variety. And plus, I really love my sausage. I tried to convince her. I was like, what would be cool on the wall? A neon sausage. And she's like, no. I was like, ah. Like, no one likes what I like. But it would have been cool. It would have been super cool. So then you see all the fun stuff that's got a lot of personality, but then I also do stuff that's really clean. This is a page of restaurant identities, right? Lettering that goes in logos. So it's got to be something that's not the star of the show, but actually kind of helps, set the tone. So you have, stuff that's sans serif, stuff that's a lot more cleaner. This one's not as exciting, I know, as the other ones. But then I'll show you examples. So this is Junction. It's a bakery and bistro in Virginia. It opened, I don't know why I'm looking over here. Well, I like to see it big, too. So I'm looking over there. But it's a bakery bistro that opened, I think, in 2015, 14, around there. But so the whole style mood board was, vintage, kind of old, badges are hot now, and anytime I get to do a badge, I'm like, heck yeah, I'll do a badge. So badge is something that maybe is indicative of vintage railroad or, like old-timey flour sacks. If I had to do a lot of research on flour sacks, a lot of research. So then that's what kind of got approved and went on, and that's the actual signage on there. But here's some other options I like to show. Even though the other one it's a little bit cleaner, kind of finalized logo, these are the options I have that I really loved. The top line speaks a little bit more of vintage railroad, kind of 1800s. Bottom is a little bit more 30s, right? I like to show these because I am super proud of my wheat. That wheat illustration, it took me forever to do that wheat. And I was just like, I love it so much, I'm gonna use it on everything. If I like it, I'm like, please use it. So I'm like, oh, 1 wheat, next option, I'm gonna put 4 wheat on there. See how you like that? I was like, please choose it. But they didn't. But I got some wheat on there, which I'm excited for. And this is all lettering. The only thing I did not letter was the address and the ampersand. Because ampersands are actually really hard. Like, what letters do I find hardest? Capital G's, S's, and ampersands. It's just that little bit of counter. When it curves up, I'm like, oh. If it's too small, man, it closes up and you just lose the ampersand. But then I got to push it a little farther for the exterior mural. So there's my lettering junction. Then I did the ribbon and all the illustration. The only thing I did not do was the font, the Serving Del Rey, and the broad down at the bottom, and the VA stuff up top. But when you take your lettering and you get to blow it up that big and you get to see it, and you see people walking in front of it or whatever, I'm like, that's pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie. And I also illustrated that little train car down there. I'm proud of that one too, because it took me forever. But yeah, and I also got my wheat on my wheat. I know, I'm so proud of that wheat. That pattern on the denim booth covers on the fabric. I'm like, you want to use my wheat? Yeah, let's put it on there. Repeat it. So I'm super stoked. So it took me forever, man. I was like, I don't know. This wheat doesn't look like wheat. All right, so there's that. And then so the question is, I showed you all these styles. What do I suck at? It's anything that looks real, anything that's real hand lettering. Like I follow some folks that do the calligraphy and the real, like using real ink and brushes. Boy, I'm bad at it. Like this is for a show title called Instant Mom on the Nickelodeon. She's a party girl and she gets married and suddenly she gets kids. You know what I mean? And so it had to be like, what shows her party girl meeting mom vibe. So I was like, oh, I'll do some lipstick lettering. And this was so hard. This took me longer than anything else I've shown so far other than my wheat. You know what I mean? Because I just couldn't. I'm a Magic Mouse gal. Like I don't do the Wacom or the Wacom. I can't do it. I can't do curves on it. And so when I was like, I need this texture, how do I do it? I actually had to design it on the computer, like actually letter it digitally. Then I had to light box it to get that texture, and it still looked horrible. It's so stiff. I show it just to show I'm human too. I have failures, and that's it right there. So what style do I wish I could do more? There's always one style I try to pitch for everything. No one ever says yes, but I'd love to do it. And so I'm like, you know what you need? You need some black letter. Does anyone, black letter? Yeah, it's beefy, it's masculine, I want to use it. But then no one ever says yes. So the top left is I tried to pitch it for a gastropub. They said no. I'm like, okay, tried. The bottom left is I don't get to use it in a commercial project. I did something for the Instagram. But the right is actually for a Nick project called Nella the Princess Knight. Anyone ever, kiddos, watch that? This is how I'm going to tell my shows. She's a princess in medieval time, but she's also a knight. And she goes, saves unicorns and horses, but she's little. She's like a elementary school kid, but she has like 2 jobs, princess and knight, right? So because it's medieval, they're like, Danielle, do you want to do black letter? I go, you have no idea how long I've been waiting for someone to say, do you want to do that? I'm like, yeah, I do want to do it. So this is what I call my baby black letter, because it's supposed to be, for kids. It can't be too strong looking or too sharp, so everything's all rounded and happy. That E is smiling at all those kids. You know what I mean? So that's what you have to think of when you do it. If you're drawing it from scratch, these are the things you put into it. And this is probably round, oh boy, like 8. Because we did so many shields. I did like the top of the shield references her tiara, right? Because I think that turns into a bow. She takes it off and it turns into a bow. Don't quote me. I didn't watch the show. But I think it does turn into a bow, or she does something with it. Anyway, so we put that shape in there. But, I mean, I did a shield with a castle on it, and I did a shield with clouds, and I did ribbons because, there's flags and ribbons on the castle. I was like, let's do that. And, of course, all that did not make it. But, I mean, so that shield went out. But I'm super proud of it because I got my black letter in there. It's super fun and happy. And, yeah, my black letter wins the day one time. So here's some, I figured if I'm talking about lettering, I mean, I'm not going to show you how to do it because it took me a long time to get to this point, but here's some tips and tricks I use when I do like full compositions. Like, because if you show one word, okay, one word's got style, but how do you put a whole message in a similar style and how does it work on a page, on a card, on branding, whatever. So here's some kind of tips and tricks about y'all might like to see. So one of the easiest way to kind of boost the look of your lettering and the composition, line work, man. Anytime I'm like, because when designers are in a crunch and they need that one thing to help them kind of push it and get it done, line work is mine all day. I'm like, I'm going to put a line here, boom, done. Now it has flow. So, so it could be just kind of something holding the message. It could be something coming off the lettering to kind of get it grounded so it's not so floaty. Or it can even be, a type of line shadow that just goes right on the edge of it and suddenly, boom, it looks more vintage. Or, it's not so soft looking. Maybe it has a little bit more personality. So the top is for American Greetings, bottom is for Seth Design Group, and the left actually was just printed, left. And it's die cut card, which I'm super stoked for because no one ever lets me do die cut. So like, yeah, die cut. Okay. So on the right is also more examples of line work. I mean, I did initial comps for Shimmer and Shine. Right. I know, I didn't notice when I put this slide together. I go, oh. I was like, line work, okay, line work, okay. And then I was showing it to my sister. I was like, how's the flow? And she goes, did you do that on purpose? I go, what do you mean? And she goes, did you put those together? I go, no. But it's going to take too long to find another example, so I kept it. So right side, Shimmer and Shine. It's about two genies that live in a bottle. They have human friends. They, all their fancy lands in the bottle. So the whole idea is, I Dream of Genie, 60, something kind of fun, bouncy. That's their thing. They want things that have bounce to it, to rhythm, because it's supposed to be fun. You know what I mean? So just imagine when these things get animated and it's already got a little bit of bounce to it, it kind of helps keep that motion. Right? So Shimmer and Shine, I didn't end up having, this was killed, but I still like it. On the left, American Greetings, I mean, different messages, but the fact that line work, almost similar line work, works on both, there you go. Something that kind of help either fill space, right? Sometimes I have issues if I need to pull out a couple of words that are most important, then I have this random gap. I'm like, well, what do I do? Line work. Totally works. And a little bit of black letter too, kind of. So another one is borders. If you're at the letter a whole thing and it sits on a page, how do you not make it look like it's going to float away, right? How do you get it to look a little bit more grounded? And an easy one I do that I love to do is borders. If you see in my Instagram, I do a lot of borders because I don't get to do a lot in my commercial work. So I'm like, I'm going to border it up. You need to border it done. I'm going to do it. So this is a series for Halloween cards that came out last year. I mean, I was super stoked. It's got neon ink on there. It's got hot foil, so it's got, kind of the shimmer to it. And there's 3 of them. And I was like, yeah, I'm liking that. I actually got to see it in person because I don't work kind of locally. I work on the coasts. Right, so usually when things get printed or finished, I don't get to see it. I was like, oh, my child is off. I'm like, oh, I hope they have a good life. I don't ever get to see it in person. So this time, I'm like, I asked the AD, I was like, I really like those Halloween cards. Could you send me some? He's like, yeah. I'm like, oh my God. He said yes. Because I was going to I'll buy them from you because I can't find them anywhere in Lawton. They're in Target or some of the stores that carry that line. But I mean, Lawton's little. They're not going to have that type of big enough display for, I'm like, okay. But I do check Target in my town all the time. I'm like, okay, no, I'm not in there. So yeah, so that was super fun. Another example of borders, this is my personal work. Like I said, if I have a chance to do anything personal, I love doing borders, so I'm going to do it. So Christmas time, it's kind of a Gothic architecture border, some lettering, left side. I'm developing this kind of wavy lettering that I really like, and anytime I get to use it, I try to use it. So this is stuff to kind of get me in the mood to experiment and create on my own that I put on the Instagram. So another example is shadows, American greetings. Sometimes if you letter and it's lacking something, shadow. Just like line work, what can you do with something easy that's going to look good and really serve you in your time frame? Shadow. Right? Yeah. Next, shadow, right? So I had the respect on there. This is for Dad Days cards. These were in Target. And it had the neon orange, which I was super excited about. But then, the lettering is there, but it's being overwhelmed by the pattern. What do? Shadow. You know what I mean? Colored shadow even. Make that extrude, pop it out, and now it looks heavy enough to where it's not going to get lost in that pattern. So because I do so much lettering, I end up kind of making or keeping like a little library that I constantly reuse because it helps me work faster. Right? So this is my little serif library that I have on my computer. And these are actually words I've used in lettering projects. And this is kind of what I named them. Right? So nothing crazy. I mean, tall vintage, chunky clean, just stuff where I can easily find it in my lettering folder. And then if I need it, I pull those letters out and I use it to help boost whatever kind of main lettering is on something. This just helps me work faster, you know what I mean? This is never the star of the show, so then it could look like it's been from my library, and then, it kind of help be subsidiary. Then here's my sans, so anything I do that's supposed to look a little bit more casual and hand-lettered, I name it hand. Right, tall clean, extended clean. Extended clean was actually the first one that I built my library off of, because it takes me forever to look for fonts, so I don't usually use fonts. Sometimes they make me, right? And I'm like, okay. But usually I just like to use that in my library. And the one thing I always needed that I couldn't find was something with a smaller X height, and that was kind of extended, something that was a little bit fatter, right? Because I need some of those words are small, and I need it to go in a ribbon, but some of those fonts are just too skinny, you know what I mean, or too tall. So then that's what I started building my library off of. So now I got a pretty good little collection. And then my scripts, because it's easier for me to do that from scratch. But sometimes if I need something in a pinch, there it is. Like I said, the monoline is very popular now. I did probably about 5 or 6 cards in the last year just with that style. So it's easy for me to kind of open up that file, use it as a base, customize where needed. But since it's already done and that style is there, it's kind of easier for me to work quicker in that fashion. Yeah. But you kind of see how lettering also, I do the usuals, bouncy things for weddings and birthdays. So that's lettering, and you saw me do stuff where lettering is the show, like cards, things like that, where it's got to be the main focus. So I thought I'd pull some branding in here for y'all, so it'd be a little bit, show the actual range. So lettering and branding, how do I use it? I do logos as well, but I like to push in lettering as much as possible. This is for a soup noodle bar in California. It's a Vietnamese. Soup means soup in Vietnamese, right? So I actually helped with the naming concepts as well. So it means, it looks like sup as in eat, but also the word soup means soup. So it works for a pho place, right? I actually went there a couple years ago, super delicious. I never get to go anywhere that I help brand. I was hoping to get free food, but it did not happen. I asked. I was like, oh, okay. It was good. But he allowed me to take pictures. So I was like, oh, all right, I guess that's a good thing. So it opened in 2015. It's a super cute little place. This is with Seth Design Group. So, I mean, what is the logo? It's the top view of a bowl of noodles. Lettering looks like noodles. Super simple, but it's got impact. But then how do I kind of extend from just a logo? She allowed me to do a lot more lettering for the server shirt, so it's something that's kind of fun, right? It's all the things that go in a bowl of noodle in the shape of a bowl of noodles, right? So she really allowed me to use a bunch of different styles to kind of help marry everything, and it looks interesting. It's super fun. And then also, how do you push it even farther? Or let's take this logo that I had a really hard time trying to see how they connect to still be legible. Let's make all these menu headers. And I was like, all the menu headers? She's like, yeah. I go, oh boy. Because then how do you make it like legible, but still have those gaps and those connections? And so, because the thing is, you got to read it. Right? That's one thing. If I ever do something too crazy, they go, Danielle, you can't read it. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So then how do I push that back but still give it some of that personality? So that was pretty fun. Another example is the grilled cheese bar, GCDC in DC. I think it's like 2 blocks from the White House. I have not had a chance to eat there. I would love to. but I have not made it to DC in a long time. The thing is, it was there after I moved from Baltimore. So if I still lived in Baltimore, I'd been like 12 o'clock to go eat some cheese. But it did not happen. So with this, it's the logo's basically like a round label on a cheese wheel. It's all about cheese, right? So then I have the short GCDC. How do I make it fit on the circle? It's got to be extended, right? The circle starts, being concave. It can't be too tall, right? So those are all kind of things you got to think about when what do I have to work in what space. In this instance, she allowed me to, she's like, Danielle, let's do an alphabet. I was like, I'm on it. I'm going to do this alphabet. So the thing is, it had to be the same style as GCDC. So it had to be short, extended. I did all caps, right? But then you can also use it with the cheese-colored line shadow or without. So it kind of added another instance of, variety. And then this is kind of like a specialty thing. She wanted some kind of fun chalkboardy lettering things to use in store, right? For, the beer and wine section, blah, blah, blah. So then she allowed me to kind of do more of this chalkboard style. And you know how I said I suck at the things that look more natural? Illustrator brushes. Like, if I didn't find the Illustrator brush with the right texture, I would be light boxing for years. I could not get that texture. But luckily, I had the tools to kind of get that with a little bit of personality. Like, yeah, Illustrator brushes all day. You want something hand-lettered looks real? Illustrator brushes. So another one is Street Kitchen. This is for Indian place in Virginia. It's the sister of American Tandoor, which is like kind of the nicer, richer area. The next door, they got the fast casual, like fast food, right? So then lettering for the whole Street Kitchen is supposed to be based off of the hand painting on the hand lettering on trucks, like in India. So that's kind of the style we went for. And then using that as a base, the logo, then I got to use that kind of same style and start doing all these menu headers. Because it's a fast casual place, order pickup is always the biggest one. So that's the ones I start with. And then it's just kind of fun to see how far you can push that style. And then Poke Papa, that's one just opened in DC. They do the Hawaiian-inspired poke bowls. Anyone ever eat poke? Delicious. I haven't eaten there, but I've had it in other places. And I'm like, poke, yeah. But for this one, it was something with action. Because like Hawaii, surfers, people coming out of the water, you got the action, something that doesn't look too clean, right? Something because it's all about the mixing. So I'm like, heck yeah. So then we did this style, and you got the fish in there, But then how do you push that style into the other lettering that goes on the menus or in the store? So I really got to push that, so it was kind of fun. But also the thing with lettering, now that I look at this, is that you can't really have two letters. You can't just copy and paste, right? Lettering is making things from scratch. If you wanted the same letters over and over, you use font, right? So I only had one time, I was like, oh man, I'm in a pinch here. I'm just gonna copy this letter and paste it, and I actually got called out on it. The client goes, I thought lettering was all different letters. I was like, you're right. It is. I apologize. So that's why I don't ever do that again, because I don't need that email twice. So that's why if you draw from scratch, draw from scratch. Even though I might use some like pre-made letters as a base, you can't put one on top of the other and it's the same. That's cheating. Lettering cheating. So here's some social media ads using the same kind of, textured style. You go from the kind of more brush scripty of the logo and the other lettering for the menu, and how do you kind of keep that visual aesthetic for ads, right? This also talks about how do you kind of create a hierarchy or a layout, right? If I get the phrase in an email typed out in the same font, new firecracker bowl, well, how do you go from there, right? What's your buzzword? Firecracker. All right, I'm gonna make that biggest. What's your other buzzwords? It's new, and it's a bowl. Okay, so now I kind of know how to start developing that layout and actually getting those things to marry. And if you notice the new and the bowl, it's my little library. It's my Square script. Totally it helped me in a pinch. I'm like, it works. It's a little bit more, kind of modern looking than something too pretty. So I'm like, heck yeah, library saves the day. And of course, what else? Line work. I have, right? That's the thing. These are the secrets. I have new firecracker bowl and a bowl. And I have all the space around it. What do I do? Something that gives that motion. Line work. These are my secrets, y'all. You're going to be doing some lettering, get me out of business. So fact, After every restaurant branding project I do, I gain weight because you're looking at, they're like, here's the menu, Danielle. I'm like, oh, it looks delicious. Sounds delicious. They're like, Danielle, the food photography came in. I'm like, oh, it looks amazing. Look at that cheese, right? So then as these go on, I'm like, you know what I can eat right now? Cheese. So for after that GCDC project, I pounded cheese for like 2 days. And the thing is, I'm lactose intolerant. So it was awful. And I had to go, no, just don't send me the images. I don't need them. I like that you let me see what they're gonna make, but I can't eat it. And I just gained so much weight. Like poke bowls, rice. I was eating it. I was like, oh, I want some fish. So yeah. So lettering and beyond, like I do these commercial projects. You know, what do I do for myself? Because personal fulfillment is always a big thing, right? So I've been trying to get into the font game. So I've been working on this font, I don't know, 3 so months now. It's called Cursory. It's built off my first font failure, which I will not show. But it ended up being too thin, so you'd have to use it on like a billboard to see it. So I was like, well, I'm just gonna make it fatter. So that's what I did. So I used it as a base, and I made it fatter. So now I kind of have this fun retro type of lettering that I'm like, I really do want to make it a font. I'm still on kerning phase and working on like some other punctuations, but it's getting there. And then maybe another lettering that I really like, my wavy, because I use it so much. I'm like, and I have the alphabet. I was like, well, let me try to learn how to make it into a font. I'm learning Font Lab. It's not easy, I'll say that. A lot of Googling, a lot of YouTube tutorials. So I'm just like, why won't it do this? And you can't zoom in. There's no hotkey to zoom in. So then it's harder for me because I'm like, why can't I zoom in? So that's the thing. It's one of those things you have to learn a new program. Sometimes it's hard, but I'm persevering because I really want to do it. But it is fighting me, I'll say that. So also Instagram, like I said, these are so much more different than my commercial projects, so I really get to push style, right? I went to Japan recently to see some family, and so I was like, all right, here's a chance for me to kind of do something really a little bit more, exciting. Because this goes into the realm of legibility. When you do commercial projects, they have to read it, right? But when I get to do stuff for me, I'm like, they can try to read it. I can make it any way I want, so that's why I really get to push style. So for cakes, I had that lettering left over. I wanted to make a border. It just kind of, I know, I'm kind of easy that way. I'm like, I have it, I'll use it. And then using some different type of script style. And then also I'm trying to be more into the Photoshop with the texturing. I'm using Illustrator all day, every day. These are vector. When I have to do texture, I'm a little bit Photoshop scared. So I've been trying to get over that by getting some brushes and learning how to paint things. So it's a process, but I'm enjoying it. So wrapping up, I trawled through my whole category of freelance. What word do y'all think I've lettered the most? Other than the, and a, because that's cheating. What word? What was it? Letter. Nope. Any other guesses? No, what was it? Love. Look at all those loves. So many people love other folks, and I get to tell them that, right? All those loves. If you see that, it's my little square script down there, too. But yeah, look at all those different styles just for one word. You know what I mean? People want different things, different messages, different feels. So then, I kind of help facilitate that. And, I brought a prop, which I was going to show earlier. But one of those things, I say I don't ever get to see my work in person. I was in Walmart. Don't look at it yet. I was in Walmart, and I was walking by the book section, and I go, that looks familiar. Did I do that? And I did. It was the lettering on Harlequin. Look at that. The Desire section. If y'all ever, this is the CEO daddy next door, right? Under Desire. I wanted to show y'all that mood board, but I wasn't sure if I was allowed to, but it was 8 pages of dudes seducing women. It was Highland Voyeur, and it was, the funniest one I saw was, the title was so great. It was Have Baby, Need Billionaire. I was like, oh, yeah, I want my lettering on that book. So there you go. Desire, right? Casual script. Okay, and that is me. I also have some swag. I did some Yes enamel pins. If anyone wants one, feel free to take them. And people love lettering now. A little overwhelming. I showed a lot of examples. Yay, done. Lettering. questions? Question?
I actually have two questions.
Sure.
One, the first one, on average, how many iterations do you typically do
Sure.
for each project? And then the other question would be, can you expand on your process a little more?
Sure.
Because your fonts have a very organic feel, and
Letter-
I'm fascinated. Your
lettering,
lettering,
yes.
Excuse me, your lettering has a very organic feel, and I'm fascinated that you
Sure.
do it all digitally, right?
Yeah, Magic Mouse, digital all day. 'Cause I don't even sketch. I did an interview recently where the guy wanted to see sketches, the final, and I go, I don't have sketches. And he goes, you don't have sketches? I go, no, is that bad? Am I not going to be interviewed now? So I was like, so I just Google search sketches, and I go, I found one project where I had an awful Magic Mouse sketch, and I go, this is all I got. But for greeting cards, it's usually, like I said, it takes about a week from here's the email to here's first round of roughs, and I usually do 2. Sometimes I can get away with 1, but usually I have another kind of idea that I want to make sure gets seen because it could really push it to where it needs to be, so I kind of do 2. For logos, I do 2 to 3, and then for Nickelodeon, however many they say they want, then I do. Sometimes I kind of maybe change line work up a little bit to cheat, but they're like, no, we need a new idea, so then I'm like, okay. So for that, the Nickelodeon stuff, it could take probably a week and a half maybe for first roughs. I get a little bit extra time, but the moment from first out of roughs to final, that could take months because they have to take it on their end and they have to show it to committee and they have to show it to people in their office. And so then that's when I start getting changes. So that's what takes forever. But usually for greeting cards, I mean, Danielle needs to be taller. Okay. Danielle, try some different colors. Okay. So then that's why that's my turn and burn. That's things I do for volume for that instance. What was your other question? I'm so sorry.
Expanding on your process.
Oh, process. I mean, it's pretty simple. They send me a mood board. They have and maybe the things about which I love to do with Halloween. Halloween for me is the easiest visual get, right? Like I know bats, eyeballs, potions, whatever. Those are the visuals that I'm like, yeah, I love working on that. So for that, they're like, okay, Halloween, here's the message. You know what I mean? And then they send me a mood board. I'm getting better at if they send me a mood board, I can see the references and go, they like the chunkiness of that, or they like the pointiness of that. It looks a little bit more, masculine or whatever. So then, or if they're saying, Danielle, what do you think? Then I send mood boards. In the past, before I learned better, I used to just be like, here's an option before setting the mood board, if it was something they needed from me, but that was a disaster. So now, even if they go, well, do whatever you want, I'm like, okay, here's a mood board. Like, show me what you like, because usually I've learned that what I like, no one else likes. So then I'm like, oh man, I missed the mark. So it's always mood boards. Okay, here's first rounds. They look at it, feedback. I usually if it's due in a week, then I like to, send them the options to give me a couple of days for a final deadline for changes. And then it comes through email. I send them the final file, and then they do whatever they need to do with it. So it's pretty straightforward. Yes?
How have you gotten your work as a lettering artist get work?
Oh, internet. Internet is my friend. I wish, I'm just starting the social media game now, like Instagram. I wish I would have jumped on it, or the Twitter. I'm bad at, I like people to see what I do. I don't even see what I have to say. But if I would have jumped on it when it was first getting popular, I feel like I could be making more money, because then the eyes would have been there. But, well, social media more now, but it's a lot of, hey, I need a logo, then they don't want to pay me the money. You know what I mean? Because I got experience, so I don't want to take anything, right? So then I have to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do that. But for the big commercial stuff, website. Put the website out there. They see the names you're working with. They know you're reliable. They know you're going to meet deadlines, and you have the skill to give them something really what they're looking for. And so website all day. I went to Squarespace finally. I used to hand code because I was cheap. And I was like, I don't want to pay for Squarespace. But now that I have it and I can update it, oh, it's so much better. I'm not so poor, I can afford it. Yeah. Did that answer your question? Okay. Question? Question?
So you mentioned, you've worked with a lot of big companies. You mentioned that, having the other big companies on your roster helps to, add legitimacy. But how did you get that first big?
Oh, man, it's so weird. I think my first big project, well, I guess in first big name, it would be Nickelodeon, which is the big one. And I first did the first project probably about 5 years ago, right? NDA, it was for a show about a little girl with a backpack. that has the map and the friend, right? Right, legal? It was for that. And so the thing is, they had seen some of my works I did. I did a plate, like surface design, that was kind of a little bit more casual. And so just making the rounds on the internet, people repost your stuff. This was before Pinterest and social media, so this was going to actually like real blogs. You know what I mean? Like real blogs about design. So when that starts making the rounds, and then it starts, if it's on a popular enough blog, the right kind of eyes see it, because then it goes to a bigger market. You know what I mean? So. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's as more and more people get into the lettering game now, because more and more people are aware of it and they love it and they want to try it, because I recommend y'all do it too. It's fun, right? The more and more I'm having to hustle to make sure that I'm still up enough to the top, so I'm getting those big gigs, because I gotta make a living. You know what I mean? So the name recognition helps for sure, and then also me saying to these art directors that have these positions, higher up, hey, do you know anyone else that needs some lettering? I'm working to fill my freelance schedule. I got some openings. And then they start kind of passing me around until I start getting more work. And I'm like, thank God, because taxes are coming up, and it's always scary. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? Lettering exhausted. Oh, lettering makes me exhausted. That's it. Yay! Feel free to take some pens. All right. Oh, thank you for letting me talk about it too.
Thanks, Danielle.
For sure.
Someone will need to pass these out while I give an announcement or so. Maybe. Oh, here. Yeah. Awesome. Next week, or next month, not next week, the 14th, Blake Behrens and Kyle Simmons they own the OKC. They've been doing that for several years ago. Now they're going to be talking to us, kind of giving us some stories about what it's like to be in the biz and some of their t-shirt designs. Be here for that. Give a round of applause for all of our speakers tonight. They did a great job, and it's good to hear them. Yeah. Tech Systems brought brownies tonight. There's still quite a few over there if you want to, yes. Grab some. We usually hang out for 30 minutes or so, talking, and it'd be good to get to know each other and introduce yourselves to people. Stick around. Hey, thank you guys.